Hi there everyone, welcome again to Indian Story Read Along. Today's story is going to be from Chandamama. Chandamama was a magazine for kids that came out I think every month, right up until like the mid or early 2000s, something like that. And then they had to stop publishing these things because people just weren't reading it, which I thought was really sad. Chandamama was excellent. It had so many ancient stories from India and from all over the world. It had lessons, it had trivia, it had facts about science. It was a lot like Tinkle. And this is one of my favorite kinds of stories. It says up at the top, Legends and Parables of India. So there were all these kind of stories that they had some kind of lesson at the end. And you could kind of see where it was going. And they were based on folk tales that were told and retold. And one of these versions made it into print in this Chandamama. So this is called Trot with Trappings. The story is called Trot with Trappings. Once, Bodhisattva had been born as the prince of Varanasi. Okay, some explanation here. Bodhisattva, if you know anything about the Buddha, Bodhisattva is the soul of the Buddha. That's the name that has been given to this soul that eventually incarnated over and over again and was very wise and kind and compassionate in every incarnation. And eventually he took the life form of Prince Siddhartha, who we eventually know became the Buddha. So that soul, before he became the Buddha, was a very wise and kind person or animal or whatever it was in previous lifetimes. So this Bodhisattva was once incarnated as the prince of Varanasi. Varanasi is Kashi up north. So this prince ascended the throne at a young age. The first thing he did as the king was to reward his teachers. So you know he's a good guy, right? He's all about his teachers. Among his teachers was an old Brahmin. The young king honored him by giving him a charming horse. The horse was bedecked with all the trappings. So there you see, right there, this horse. Trappings is like he's got all this bling all over him. And it's not just like leather reins or anything. He's got like jewels. He is pretty. He's totally nicely dressed up. It wore a gold crown, and its seat too was fitted with gold ringlets, its saddle. So the old Brahmin happily mounted the horse and trotted toward his home. How marvelous! How charming! Exclaimed the people on the road. So here's something you should know. Back in the olden days where there were kings, queens, sages, Brahmins who taught princes at their palaces, back then Brahmins were very poor. It's not like they're all IT professionals like today. And I say that from experience. It's not like that where Brahmins did other kinds of jobs, not just teaching and praying and being priests and learning. That's all they did back then. So they were very poor, and they relied greatly on the charity and the patronage of kings, princes, to pay for their services, to teach them and to employ them. And so that's what it was with this guy. He never saw a beautifully decked horse. He never even had a regular horse, okay? So you have to think that he saw this thing and it's like he was getting a Ferrari. He was so thrilled with this horse, which was not only a beautiful horse, even if it was naked, but this horse comes with all these beautiful jewels on top of it. So everyone sees this guy on his brand new Ferrari, and he is just so flattered. The Brahmin felt flattered. Never in his life had he attracted such public attention. He smiled and nodded at the people. The passers-by greeted him with smiles and salutations. On reaching home, he told his wife, "What a glorious..." Scene I made as I rode the horse, how the passers-by exclaimed their greetings and praise. The old man's wife, most probably a young lady who hated him. That is my favorite line of this entire story. Because it says so much that back then young girls were married off to men who were much older than them. They didn't have a choice. They were not given an education. They were just told that they had to stay home and make babies, and that was their entire role. Now, it is perfectly fine if you want to stay home and make babies and just be a wife and mother. That's totally fine. But everyone was forced to, and that's not fine. And they were forced to marry men that they didn't even like and who were like so much older than them. That's really, really gross. So that's my favorite line. It says so much, and it tells you how the rest of the story is going to go, all in one little line. Most probably a young lady who hated him said, "My husband, hadn't those passers-by seen you so many times? Haven't they seen horses galore either? Did they beforehand feel so amazed with you or any of the horses? Why did they feel so amazed today?" So she's pretending to play dumb. Meanwhile, she's going to lead this guy somewhere he doesn't want to go. In his enthusiasm, the old Brahmin had not given any thought to such a question. He gaped without an answer. So you can kind of tell by that he might be very book smart, but he doesn't have a lot of common sense, because she's feeding him a line of logic that is actually illogical, if you take a look at where this is going. So then the wife says, "Well, it is neither yourself nor the horse that attracted the people," observed the wife. "Then?" the Brahmin asks. "It's the gold trappings of the horse and its gait," explained she. "If you put on the trappings and trot like a horse yourself, the people would be even more amazed," she added. Clearly hates him. The old Brahmin. You know what, though? I don't think it's really her fault. He must have done. This is my opinion. This is not part of the story. This is my opinion, not Chandamama's. I'm sure he did something to make her come up with this revenge, to make him put on the horse's clothes and prance around town. The old Brahmin had been so much enamored of public gaze, and this was his ego also getting in the way of his common sense, that he put on the horse's trappings and was soon out on the road. People who saw him were more amused than amazed, but when the old fellow began trotting like a horse, their mirth, their happiness, their amusement burst into wild laughter, clapping of hands, and catcalls. Like, woo! The traffic in the bazaar came to a standstill. "Thank God, is this fellow our king's teacher?" the serious-minded ones in the crowd were heard muttering. An officer ran to the king and brought the teacher's funny behavior to his notice. The king sent for the Brahmin. They stopped the prancing old man and led him into the court. The momentary zeal of the old teacher, that means zeal means enthusiasm, of the old teacher had passed. He had begun to realize his foolishness. He stood before the king, his head hung. The king too felt embarrassed and let him go home without those gold trappings, which he sent through a servant. "It is my wife who misguided me," the Brahmin murmured to himself. He grew quite angry with the lady. The lady had anticipated this. She had slipped into Bodhisattva's palace. Oh wow, she is smart. See, this is the thing that I always thought about when you think about the story behind the story. Men were given all of these opportunities since they were boys. You might think that maybe there was a boy who wanted to cook and clean and maybe stay at home or do something, some kind of work around the house or be a carpenter or something, but he was a Brahmin boy and he was forced to be a priest or a teacher or something like that. And there were all of these girls who, like the wife here, were brilliant in many ways. She could have been a minister for the king at how amazingly she manipulated this entire situation with just a few words. She's brilliant. I think she's way more smart than her husband. But she was never given a chance just because she had the bad luck to be born a girl at that time. So She even knew what was going to happen. She knew the guy would blame her, so she comes in and defends herself. She slipped into the Bodhisattva's palace. The king, Bodhisattva, sent for the old Brahmin again and told him that he should not vent his anger on his wife. After all, his wife had only talked foolish. It was he who had done foolish. No truer words than that. The Brahmin agreed with the king's observation, but he had grown quite afraid of the lady. He wouldn't take her home. From the Buddha Jatakas. So I found this really funny. This guy, if he were a little bit smarter, he could totally deal with her. That would be no problem. Anyway, I love these kind of old type folk tales from Chandamama. And I have a lot of Chandamamas. So if you join us again next time on Indian Story Read Along, I will read more stories for you. All right, we will see you soon.